The taste of copper lingers, thick as sin, on my tongue. It's always there now, even when I don't bite my lips raw. Guilt, you see, isn't a ghost. It's a parasite. It nests in your marrow, feeds on the rot you try to bury. And I've buried so much. The house exhales when I enter, its timbers groaning like old bones. Dust motes swirl in the jaundiced light, each a tiny requiem. She waits in the attic, where the shadows congeal into something solid. I climb the stairs anyway, drawn by the scent of charred roses. Her perfume once. Now it's the stench of blistered flesh.
You promised.
Her voice rasps, a serrated thing that flays the air. Emmeline. Her name was Emmeline. I see her in fragments, a jawbone peeking through melted skin, eyes like cracked porcelain, pooling with liquid night. She died because I loved her too little and myself too much. A match struck in jealousy, a velvet curtain kissed by flame, her laughter curdling into screams. I watched. The attic is a cathedral of regret. Milky moonlight filters through the cracked skylight, illuminating the symbol I've carved into the floorboards. A spiral, its edges smeared with my blood. A ward, a plea. But the dead don't forgive. They hunger. Every night, the ritual. Salt, iron, the incantation whispered through split lips. Every night, failure. She slips through the cracks, her fingers blackened twigs, nails like rusted needles scraping down the walls.
You owe me,
she hisses.
a life for a life.
Last week, I found a child's ribbon in the garden. Sky blue, crusted with soil.
Mine now,
she crowed as I retched. The earth here is pregnant with secrets, swelling with the things I've fed it. Small bones, broken vows. Tonight, the spiral bleeds without provocation. My hands shake as I light the black candles. Their wax the color of a bruise. The air curdles. Emmeline materializes, not as a wraith, but solid, her ruined face inches from mine. Rot blooms where her lips part.
Enough bargains.
She croons.
Time to pay.
The floorboards splinter. Roots surge upward, gnarled and glistening, coiling around my ankles. They pull. I scream, but the sound drowns in the cacophony of her laughter. The house groans, walls peeling back to reveal a rib cage of splintered beams. Below, the cellar gapes, a maw lined with teeth of broken glass. I see them then, the others, pale shapes writhing in the loam, their mouths stitched shut with my lies. Emmeline's hand, cold, so cold, cups my cheek.
You thought grief was a grave?
She whispers.
It's a cradle, and you'll rock us all to sleep.
The roots yank harder. My knees crack against the floor. The spiral's blood mingles with mine, binding me to the pattern. A vessel, an anchor. Emmeline's ashes swirl into a crown above her brow.
Forever.
She smiles. I understand too late. The guilt was never mine alone. It was the kindling. And now I'll burn with them. The cellar swallows me whole. The hall on Lakespur Lane had grown too quiet. Mabel sat by the window, her hands curled in her lap like pale moths. Outside, the birch trees whispered in the wind, leaves fluttering like secrets she wasn't meant to know. Someone had been in her room again last night. At 83, time slipped through Mabel's mind like water through cupped hands. Faces blurred. Hours vanished. Names dangled just out of reach. Her daughter had hired Clara? A quiet girl who brewed tea and never moved too quickly. Mabel didn't mind her, but she didn't trust her either, especially now. For a week, she'd woken to creaking at the end of the hall, then footsteps, slow, dragging, then breathing, not hers.
There's no door there, Mabel.
Clara would say gently. But in the still hour before dawn, when the walls felt too close, and her heart remembered things her mind had tried to forget, she saw it. A narrow door, brass knob, always locked. It had been there once, when she and Simon were children. Before the game, hide and seek, she'd been it. Simon had hidden in the cedar trunk, giggling. She had closed the lid and turned the key. He always won. She wanted to win just once. She forgot to let him out. At 3:12, Mabel opened her eyes. The door was there. She rose. Her cane tapped the wood floor. The knob was damp and cold beneath her fingers. She opened it. A narrow staircase spiraled downward, the air thick with mildew. A lullaby floated up, off-key and cracked, but familiar. Step by step, memories returned. Her mother's scream, her father nailing shut the room. An accident, they'd said. But Mabel remembered the key in her pocket, and how long it had stayed there. At the bottom, a small room, toys decayed in the corners, wallpaper peeled in curling strips, and in the center, a cedar trunk. It was open now. Something shifted inside. "You left me there," said the thing in the dark. Mabel's breath hitched. I forgot. "You didn't forget," it whispered. "You chose not to remember." From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Small, brittle, hollow-eyed. I waited. Morning. Clara found Mabel curled in her chair by the window, eyes wide open and unblinking. She wasn't dead, not exactly. But when Clara called her name, she didn't respond. The doctor said it was a fugue state. "Sometimes, in dementia," he explained, "the mind retreats into itself." That night, Mabel sat upright in bed, whispering to someone only she could see. "I'll hide this time." When Clara passed the end of the hallway, she noticed something strange. The wallpaper had begun to peel neatly in a rectangular outline, just large enough to be a door.
Now, I don't know a ton about the history of my childhood home, but I do know that it was old as hell, and one of the creepiest places I've ever lived in. It was a 4-story house. Fancy, right? With lots of dark spaces and long stairways. Basically, it was really big. There wasn't a moment in that house that I felt like I was truly alone. and there wasn't a hallway that felt truly empty. I was just barely out of toddlerhood when I started to develop severe anxiety. I was afraid to do anything alone. I was always checking behind me, sleeping with my head under the covers, seeing things, hearing things, you name it. I'm almost 100% sure that there was something paranormal making me feel that way. I wasn't the only one seeing and hearing things though. My older brother shared a room with me, and he always slept on the top bunk. His bed was maybe a foot away from the ceiling, and the attic was right above us. He told me that some nights he'd hear adult footsteps right above his head, just circling the attic. But it gets weirder. He's told me that at one point he woke up next to a shadowy figure just lying in bed with him. He claims the figure had 2 white specks for eyes, and that it wasn't acting malicious, just lying there silently. This might have been some kind of sleep paralysis hallucination, but considering the other events, I wouldn't be surprised if it was some kind of spirit. And now, on to the worst one. The playroom. That room was the creepiest fucking thing in the house, and I get shivers just thinking about it. It sat at the end of a long hallway on the top floor, just below the attic. My room was down the hall from it, and it was always pitch black. I remember staying up at night, staring at it, just in case something moved. I often couldn't take my eyes away, in fear of something appearing if I did. Somehow, every time I looked at that doorway, the door was wide open. And the door wasn't weak either. It worked perfectly fine and wouldn't open unless you turned the knob. I'd ask my dad to close it before I went to bed, and it would stay closed for a bit until it just slid open again. I'm not a door specialist, but it was just arguably creepy. But wait, there's more. Now that we're older and out of that house, me and my brother found out that we shared a terrifying experience. We both saw something incredibly creepy in that same place. I remember it vaguely. It was a small, neutral, glowing white face in the playroom. It looked a bit like a little kid from my memory. It had no body, just a pure white face in the dark. It was around my height, and its eyes were kind of just not there. I don't remember much, but I remember it was the single most terrifying thing I'd been through. I don't know if I hallucinated or what, but I know it felt incredibly real at the time. Maybe it was a dream or something, because all I remember is seeing that fucking face, getting scared, and running back to my bed. I don't think I screamed, but I seriously don't remember. I kind of love-hate thinking about it because it just makes my hair stand on end. Thanks to that, I've now been diagnosed with anxiety. I am taking medication for it, and I'm alive, but I thought it was worth noting. I could go on, but I can't really think of anything else right now. Maybe my next post should be about the attic or basement. Nothing really happened there, but they freaked me out for sure.
When I was a young boy, barely 5 or 6, I suffered from relentless nightmares. Night after night, they returned, so vivid and horrifying that my mother felt the need to kneel beside my bed, whispering prayers over me. But the prayers did nothing. The nightmares always came, and it was always the same dream. I would wake up in my room, suffocated by an overwhelming darkness that felt as if it was alive. It slithered into my lungs, coiled around my chest. I would fumble in the nightstand, my trembling fingers closing around a cheap plastic flashlight, slamming my palm against it. I forced out a weak, flickering beam, barely enough to push back the blackness. I lifted my eyes to the wall, heart pounding against my ribs. There, bathed in the sickly glow of the blood-red shine of the moon, was my Scooby-Doo clock. The plastic face was warped in the dim light. The grinning cartoon dog now twisted into something grotesque. His once friendly eyes seemed hollow, lifeless. The second hand stuttered, ticking slower than it should, as if something unseen was dragging it back, refusing to let time move forward. A creeping dread curled around my spine. The clock was stopped at 3 a.m. again, a fragment of time carved into the bones of the night. It was a moment that never passed, a time that never changed, as if the night itself was caught in a loop, holding me prisoner in the dark. The moonlight bled through my windows, not the gentle silver glow of a summer's night, but an eerie, viscous red. It slathered the walls, the floor, even my skin, as though I had been dunked in freshly spilled blood. It made my bed look like an altar, the sheets stained crimson in its glow. The heat followed soon after, an oppressive, suffocating wave, as the air thickened with the stench of burning flesh, not the rich, savory scent of food sizzling over a fire, but something thick, acrid, and suffocating. The unmistakable reek of charred skin searing to the bone. A whisper slithered through the darkness, thin and wet, like the rasp of something breathing too close. It wasn't the wind. It was in the room. My body seized with a cold so deep, it felt like my bones were turning to ice. I didn't think, I just moved, yanking the blankets over my head, cocooning myself in shaking breaths and blind terror. My flashlight trembled in my grip, its weak beam flickering against the fabric, casting distorted shadows that swayed and stretched like reaching fingers. Then the air grew heavier, thick with a presence that hadn't been there before. A slow, deliberate pressure sank into the mattress, the fabric stretching and creaking beneath an unseen weight. The blankets tightened around my legs, pulled ever so slightly forward, as if some unseen force, dense, suffocating, and unmistakably alive, had settled itself at the foot of my bed. The room exhaled in silence. I wasn't alone. I refused to look. I clamped my eyes shut, squeezing them so tight that spots of color danced behind my lids. If I didn't see it, it couldn't see me. But I could feel it. The weight on the bed, the thick hush of the air, the slow, deliberate pull of the blankets toward it. All of it was real. Too real. My mind screamed that it was a dream, that none of this was happening. But my body knew the truth. Something was there, and it was waiting for me to open my eyes. I swallowed hard, forcing down the nausea rising in my throat. Be brave. It was just a dream. It had to be. With every ounce of courage I could gather, I gritted my teeth and inched the blanket down, just enough to peek. At the foot of my bed, something sat in the shadows. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end, as the whisper came again, closer this time. My fingers, shaking, angled the flashlight toward the figure. It sat with its back toward me, draped in a ragged black robe. The fabric looked damp, as if soaked in something thick and viscous. The whisper came again, its words like rusted nails scraping against my skull. You have been chosen. Rejoice. Slowly, agonizingly, it turned. The first thing I saw was the claw. Where its hand should have been, a monstrous crimson talon glistened, its surface slick with oozing black sludge. The jagged edges pulsed as if breathing. the liquid dripping onto my sheets, burning through them like acid. I tried to scream, but my throat closed around the sound, strangling it before it could escape. My lips parted, my chest heaved, but only silence came. It began to rise, slowly, deliberately. Its movements weren't natural. They were twisted, like a puppet being pulled upright by invisible strings. The weight of it filled the room, pressing down on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. It felt like the walls were shrinking, the space between us dissolving. Panic seized me, and I threw the covers over my head again, curling into myself, my flashlight shaking violently in my grip. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, a wild, frantic rhythm that drowned out everything else. The air around me stretched and warped. Every second dragged, bending under the weight of my terror. The room filled with the kind of silence that felt too thick, too unnatural, as if the entire world had been snuffed out, leaving only me and whatever lurked just beyond the thin barrier of my blankets. I didn't want to look. I couldn't. But something compelled me. An unbearable tension that demanded to be answered. With a shaking breath, I forced myself to peel the covers back again. And that's when I saw its face. The right side of its face was eerily human. Too perfect. Too pristine. Like a marble sculpture kissed by divine hands. Untouched by time or suffering. Its cheekbones were sharp. Its skin smooth. Its eye calm and unwavering. If I had only seen that side, I might have believed it was an angel. But the left... Oh God, the left. It was ravaged, grotesque, a nightmare stitched onto beauty. The flesh was torn and uneven, a patchwork of decay and exposed bone, with dark matted fur creeping along the edges where skin should have been. Its eye, swollen and milky, rolled in its socket, twitching with a sickening wetness. Flies feasted on the open wounds, burrowing into the oozing gashes, their tiny legs disappearing beneath flaps of rotting skin. A forked, snake-like tongue flicked from its lips, hissing softly as it tasted the air between us. It lurched forward, its grotesque form crawling into my space. Inch by agonizing inch. The smell of its breath slammed into me, a festering cocktail of rot, sulfur, and decay. I gagged, my stomach convulsing, but I couldn't move. It spoke its voice a rasping death rattle. Come with me, child. Let us soar into the night sky. Then I woke up.